7 strangers from different cities, different families, different worlds, thrown into one dorm as teenagers. Now, over a decade later, they finish each other's sentences, reach for the same foods, and share habits so identical it's almost genetic. But here's the thing, none of them are related by blood. So what happens when 7 people live, eat, sleep, and breathe together for years? BTS happened, and their mirrored habits will genuinely surprise you.
Number 7. Jin, the Midnight Kitchen Ritual. Kim Seok-jin didn't just walk into BTS as the oldest member. He walked in as the one who would quietly reshape how 6 other young men relate to food for the rest of their lives. And it all started with a habit so simple it sounds almost too ordinary to matter: cooking ramen at 2 in the morning. But in the context of 7 teenagers crammed into a tiny dorm in Nonhyandong, Seoul, South Korea, surviving on almost nothing during their training years, that pot of instant noodles became something far bigger than a midnight snack. It became a family ritual that none of them planned, and none of them have ever stopped doing. Jin, born December 4th, 1992 in Gwacheon, Gyeonggi Province, grew up watching his mother cook at home. He carried that habit straight into the BTS dorm. While the other trainees were collapsing after 16-hour practice sessions, Jin would be in that cramped kitchen, boiling water, cracking eggs, slicing scallions, turning a $1 pack of instant noodles into something that actually felt like a home-cooked meal. And here is where the sibling effect kicked in. One by one, every single member started showing up. Not because anyone called them, not because there was a schedule. They just gravitated toward the sound of boiling water and the smell of sesame oil at midnight, the same way kids in a family drift toward the kitchen when a parent starts cooking. This became so deeply embedded in their group dynamic that Jin eventually launched Eat Jin in 2016, a mukbang-style content series on V Live, where he would eat on camera, sometimes alone, sometimes with numbers, and just talk. It was one of the earliest celebrity-driven mukbang formats before the concept exploded globally, and it worked because Jin's relationship with food was never performative. It was genuinely how he connected with people. The habit spread in ways that are visible across years of content. In Bon Voyage Season 1 in 2016, the group traveled to Northern Europe, and without any discussion, the members naturally divided kitchen duties the way siblings in a large family would. Jin leading, others chopping, someone setting the table, someone sneaking bites before the food was ready. In the Soup, both Season 1 in 2019 and Season 2 in 2021, the pattern repeated with almost eerie precision. The members would wake up at different times, do their own activities during the day, but the moment food preparation started, they would all converge without being called. Jungkook, the youngest, has said in multiple interviews and live broadcasts that he learned to cook by watching Jin, not from any class or tutorial. V has been filmed instinctively reaching for the same seasonings Jin uses. Jimin and J-Hope have both described late-night kitchen conversations with Jin as some of their most meaningful bonding moments during the early years, when the pressure of debut nearly broke them. What makes this particular shared habit so striking is that it mirrors exactly how Korean food culture works in Korean family households. In a traditional Korean home, the kitchen is not just where meals are prepared, it is the emotional center of the family. The eldest family member often leads, and the younger ones gather around, sometimes helping, sometimes just being present. BTS replicated this family structure without anyone consciously designing it. Jin cooked because that was who he was. The others showed up because that is what family does. And over 13 years, this pattern has never changed. Even after they moved from their original cramped dorm to individual apartments, members have been documented visiting each other specifically to cook and eat together. In a 2022 Weverse interview, RM mentioned that the members still default to food as their primary way of spending time together, not because they planned it, but because it is simply what feels right. That is not a habit, that is a family instinct, built one midnight ramen session at a time. And if you think the kitchen is the only place these 7 started mirroring each other like brothers, wait until you hear what happens when the lights go off. Number 6. J-Hope, the compulsive clean sweep. Jungho Sok, known to the world as J-Hope, did not earn the nickname the Clean Member from a single interview or one viral clip. He earned it across a decade of documented evidence so consistent that the other 6 members have openly called him the unofficial dorm manager, the guy who cannot physically sit still if a surface is dirty, a towel is on the floor, or a shoe is out of place. And here is what nobody expected. He turned 6 of the messiest young men in K-pop into people who now instinctively tidy up without being asked, exactly the way younger siblings eventually mirror the habits of the one family member who simply refused to live in chaos. J-Hope was born February 18, 1994 in Gwangju, and before he became a trainee under Big Hit Entertainment, he was already known in his household for keeping his personal space spotless. When he moved into the BTS dorm, the contrast was immediate and almost comical. RM, by his own repeated admission across multiple interviews and variety shows, was legendary for his messiness. The members called him the God of Destruction because he had a talent for breaking, losing, or misplacing virtually anything he touched. V's side of any shared room was documented in early Bangtan bomb videos as a landscape of scattered clothes and tangled charger cables. Jungkook, who moved into the dorm at just 15, had the habits you would expect from a teenager suddenly living without parental supervision. Into this environment walked J-Hope, and he did not lecture, he did not complain on camera for sympathy, he just cleaned, consistently, relentlessly, every single day. And that is exactly how behavioral mirroring works in real families. It is never the nagging that changes people. It is the silent repetition of a habit so constant that it eventually becomes the household norm. The earliest documented evidence appears in the 2013 and 2014 era Bangtan bombs, where J-Hope can be seen reorganizing the dorm room, folding clothes that were not his, and wiping down surfaces while other members were resting or on their phones. By 2015, something had shifted. In behind-the-scenes content from their HYHY era promotions, members were visibly picking up after themselves in waiting rooms and practice spaces. Not perfectly, but noticeably more than before. Jimin, who shared a room with J-Hope during several dorm configurations, has specifically credited Hosok with changing his personal cleanliness standards. In a 2019 V Live broadcast, Jimin mentioned that living with J-Hope made him hyper-aware of clutter in a way he never was growing up, and that he now finds it difficult to relax in a messy space. That is not a casual influence. That is a deeply internalized behavioral shift, the kind that typically only happens between family members who share living space for years. The pattern became even more visible in BTS's reality content. In Bon Voyage Season 3 in Malta in 2018, the members were sharing rooms in a villa, and multiple scenes showed them unpacking and organizing their spaces in ways that directly echoed J-Hope's system. Shoes lined up at the entrance, toiletries arranged on bathroom shelves, bags stored rather than dumped. In the Soup Season 1, J-Hope's living area was predictably immaculate, but what stood out was that the communal spaces stayed remarkably clean throughout filming, with members taking turns wiping counters and washing dishes without any visible discussion about whose turn it was. That kind of unspoken domestic coordination is something families develop over years, and BTS had clearly reached that point. Even Suga, who openly identifies as someone who prioritizes efficiency over aesthetics in his personal space, has been documented in multiple behind-the-scenes clips, keeping his studio, Genius Lab, in a state of deliberate order. Equipment stored methodically, cables managed, surfaces clear. When asked, he has acknowledged that years of living with J-Hope made neatness feel like the default rather than the exception. RM, the former God of Destruction, showed a visibly transformed living space in his solo content during the 2022 to 2023 period, with organized bookshelves and carefully arranged art pieces, a far cry from the chaotic dorm footage of 2013. None of this happened because of a house rule or a group meeting. It happened because one person cleaned every single day for over a decade, and 6 others, like younger siblings watching an older brother, slowly, unconsciously made that habit their own. And if you think sharing cleaning habits is the deepest level of behavioral mirroring these 7 have reached, the next one goes somewhere far more personal.
Number 5. Jungkook, the human mirror. Jungkook did something that no training program could teach and no company could manufacture. He absorbed the personalities of 6 older men so completely that every single member of BTS can watch him and see a piece of themselves reflected back. And the reason this happened is not complicated. It is the same reason the youngest child in any large family ends up being a blend of every sibling who came before them. He grew up watching them, not from a distance, not as a colleague. He watched them the way a little brother watches his older brothers every single day from the age of 15. Jungkook was born September 1, 1997, in Busan, the southeastern port city of South Korea. When he auditioned for Big Hit Entertainment in 2011 after appearing on the talent show Superstar K3, multiple agencies offered him a spot. 7 companies wanted him. He chose Big Hit, and he has stated the reason clearly in interviews. He saw Kim Namjoon. Something about RM's presence during that audition process made the decision for him. He was 14 years old. Within months, he had moved from Busan to Seoul, left his family behind, and was living in a dorm with 6 older trainees who were essentially strangers. He has described himself during that period as painfully shy, so introverted that he could barely hold a conversation with the other members, so quiet that J-Hope once recalled having to actively work to get him to speak during group meals. But Jungkook was never passive. He was observing, and what he observed, he internalized with a precision that the members themselves did not fully recognize until years later. The evidence is layered across a decade of content. Jungkook's speech patterns shift depending on which member he is interacting with, a habit linguists associate with deep social bonding, typically found in family units. When he is with RM, his vocabulary stretches, his sentences become more reflective, his tone drops into something more contemplative. When he is with Jin, his humor becomes broader, more physical, more dependent on timing and delivery, Jin's signature comedic style. When he is around Suga, he becomes quieter, more focused, more economical with his words, echoing Yoongi's famous preference for saying only what is necessary. When he is with J-Hope, his energy visibly lifts, his body language becomes more expressive, his laugh gets louder. With Jimin, the physical affection amplifies, the touching, the leaning, the instinctive closeness that Jimin has always used as his primary language of connection. With V, the playfulness escalates into something spontaneous and almost chaotic, mirroring Taeyang's well-documented tendency to follow whatever impulse strikes him in the moment. This is not imitation. Imitation is conscious and temporary. What Jungkook does is adaptation, the kind that only happens when someone has spent their entire formative period inside a closed social unit absorbing behavioral cues the way a child absorbs language. He did not decide to become like his Hyungs, he simply became like them because they were the people who raised him during the exact years when identity is being formed. The members have acknowledged this openly. In a 2020 interview with Weverse magazine, RM said that watching Jungkook grow up was like watching all of their individual traits get remixed into one person. Jimin has described Jungkook as someone who took a little from each of them and somehow made it entirely his own. Suga, in his characteristically blunt way, has pointed out that Jungkook's ability to pick up virtually any skill, singing, dancing, drawing, filming, athletics, comes partly from the fact that he has always learned by watching the people closest to him. And for the past 13 years, those people have been the 6 members of BTS. This is why Jungkook is called the Golden Maknae, not just because he is talented, but because his talent is built on a foundation of 6 different influences, absorbed so deeply that they function as instinct rather than imitation. He is the youngest brother who watched everything, copied everything, and eventually synthesized everything into something that carries all of their fingerprints but belongs only to him. And if you think mirroring habits and speech patterns is the limit of how deeply these 7 are synced, the next member proves that even their emotions have learned to move in unison.
Number 4. Jimin. The emotional chain reaction. Park Jimin did not teach the members of BTS to cry. He did something far more difficult. He made it safe. And once that door opened, it never closed again. What started as one member's inability to hide his emotions became a group-wide phenomenon so synchronized that when one of them breaks, the others follow within seconds, not out of performance, not out of obligation, but out of a shared emotional wiring that took years of proximity to develop, the same way siblings in a tight-knit family feel each other's pain before a single word is spoken. Jimin was born October 13, 1995 in Gumjeong District, Busan. Before BTS, he was a top student at Busan High School of Arts, majoring in contemporary dance. He was the last member to officially join the group's trainee lineup in 2012, which meant he had the shortest preparation period and carried the heaviest pressure to prove he belonged. That pressure shaped him into someone who processed stress through visible emotion rather than suppression. And in a group where the cultural norm for young Korean men was to keep feelings internal, Jimin's openness became a disruption that quietly rewired the emotional behavior of every member around him. The earliest documented instances are subtle. In 2013 and 2014 era Bangtan bombs and behind-the-scenes footage, Jimin can be seen reaching for members physically during moments of stress or exhaustion. A hand on a shoulder, an arm around a waist, his head resting against whoever was sitting next to him. What is notable in that early footage is how differently the other members responded to physical affection at that time. Suga, in particular, was visibly stiff during skinship moments. RM maintained a leader's composure that kept emotional expression measured and controlled. V was playful, but rarely vulnerable. Jin deflected emotional weight with humor almost reflexively. Jungkook was still the shy teenager who struggled to express anything beyond his work. J-Hope was the group's energy source, always performing positivity, rarely letting anything beneath the surface become visible. Jimin did not match any of those patterns. He simply existed in his own emotional register, open, unguarded, and persistent, and he never adjusted it to fit the room. He hugged when he wanted to hug. He cried when he felt like crying. He told members he loved them with a directness that had no buffer of irony or comedy around it. And slowly, year after year, the buffer in the others started to dissolve. The most visible turning point in BTS's emotional synchronization is widely documented at award shows. At the 2018 Mama Awards in Hong Kong, when BTS won the Daesong for Album of the Year, Jimin broke first. Within seconds, not minutes, seconds, Jungkook's eyes filled. Then V, then Jin, then J-Hope. RM held longest, trying to deliver a speech, but his voice cracked before he could finish. Suga stood silently, jaw tight, eyes visibly wet. This was not the first time it happened, and it would not be the last. At concert after concert during the Love Yourself and Map of the Soul tours, the same chain reaction repeated. Jimin's tears triggering a cascade across the entire group, following a pattern so predictable that fans began documenting it in real time. Psychologists who study group emotional contagion describe this phenomenon as affective synchrony, the process by which individuals in close, long-term relationships develop matching emotional responses to shared stimuli. It is most commonly observed in families, particularly among siblings who have grown up in the same household, and it requires years of sustained emotional exposure to develop. Jimin did not create this dynamic intentionally. He simply never hid what he felt, and over a decade, 6 men who were culturally trained to contain their emotions found themselves unable to remain contained when he broke. Suga, the same person who was visibly rigid during Skinship in 2013, was filmed in 2021 during BTS's Permission to Dance on Stage concert in Los Angeles, pulling Jimin into a full embrace during an emotional stage segment, holding him without hesitation, without self-consciousness, in front of 70,000 people. That transformation did not happen in one moment. It happened across thousands of meals, hundreds of late nights, and a decade of one person being unapologetically emotional until the people around him forgot that they were ever supposed to hold it in. And if you think emotional synchronization is the deepest layer of connection these 7 share, the next member reveals a habit so specific it borders on telepathy.
Number 3. The unspoken language. Kim Tae-young does not always need words to hold a conversation with the members of BTS. And what is genuinely remarkable is that they understand him anyway. Every time. Not most of the time. Every time. Over more than a decade of living and working in each other's immediate space, these 7 have developed a nonverbal communication system so precise that they can coordinate decisions, share jokes, issue warnings, and express entire emotional states through nothing more than a glance, a raised eyebrow, or a shift in posture.
And V, the member whose mind has always operated on a frequency the others openly admit they cannot fully predict, sits at the center of this silent language as both its most complex speaker and its most compelling proof that BTS functions less like a professional group and more like a family that has long since not needed sentences. V was born December 30th, 1995 in the Bisondong neighborhood of Daegu. He grew up in a farming family in Gochang County, a rural area in Gyeongsang Province, and his upbringing was markedly different from the urban backgrounds of most other members. From the earliest days of BTS, V was labeled with the Korean entertainment term 4D, a colloquial description for someone whose thought patterns, reactions, and communication style operate outside conventional expectations. He would say things in interviews that caught the other members off guard. He would react to situations in ways nobody anticipated. His facial expressions during performances carried emotions so layered that fans and analysts spent hours dissecting single frames of concert footage. But what the 4D label often obscured was something more fundamental. V was not being random. He was communicating with complete clarity, just in a register that required years of close proximity to decode. And the 6 people who spent those years beside him decoded it so thoroughly that they now respond to his nonverbal cues as instinctively as breathing. The evidence runs across every format of BTS content. In Run BTS episodes, which have aired since 2015 with over 150 episodes, the members regularly demonstrate an ability to predict each other's choices during games, complete each other's sentences during storytelling segments, and react to unspoken cues during team challenges with timing that cannot be rehearsed. V is often the catalyst for these moments. He will make eye contact with Jimin across a room, and Jimin will respond with a specific action that makes sense only to them. He will shift his expression during a group conversation by a fraction, and Suga, sitting meters away, will react to the shift before V has said anything. In a 2019 Bangtan bomb filmed backstage at a music show, V and Jungkook conducted an exchange that lasted nearly 30 seconds, in which neither of them spoke a single word, communicating entirely through facial expressions and gestures, while the other members watched and understood the entire conversation without asking for translation. This phenomenon has a name in developmental psychology. It is called a shared communicative code, and it is a hallmark of sibling relationships in families with 3 or more children. When siblings grow up in the same environment over an extended period, they develop shorthand communication systems that bypass formal language entirely. Inside references, gestural signals, tonal cues that carry meaning only within the family unit. BTS has built exactly this system, and V's role in it is uniquely significant because his communication style demanded the most adaptation from the others. Learning to read V was not optional if you lived with him. His expressions, his sudden silences, his habit of conveying warmth through eye contact rather than words. The members who learned this language fastest were the ones who spent the most time with him. Jimin, his closest friend within the group since their trainee days, reads V's nonverbal cues so fluently that their exchanges often look choreographed when they are entirely spontaneous. But what is striking is that all 7 members now operate within this silent system with equal fluency, switching between verbal and nonverbal communications seamlessly. In their 2022 group dinner during the Festa celebration, multiple exchanges happened entirely through looks, decisions about who would speak next, emotional check-ins, small jokes, all conducted without a syllable. That is not teamwork. That is the language of brothers who have shared the same air for so long that words became optional. And if you think communicating without speaking is the most sibling-like habit this group shares, the next member reveals something that runs even deeper than language itself.
Number 2. Suga, the brutal honesty pact. Min Yoongi does not do polite. He does not do diplomatic. He does not wrap criticism in 3 layers of encouragement before gently suggesting that maybe, possibly, something could be slightly improved. He says what he means what he says, and if the truth is uncomfortable, that is the truth's problem, not his. And here is what happened over 13 years. 6 men who grew up in a culture that prizes indirect communication, social harmony, and careful avoidance of confrontation learned to talk to each other with the same unfiltered directness that Yoongi brought into the dorm on day 1.
Not because he forced it, because it worked. And once it worked, it became the way BTS communicates about everything. Music, performance, personal struggles, and the conflicts that would have destroyed any other group that chose silence over honesty. Suga was born March 9, 1993 in Bukgu, Daegu. Before Big Hit, he was an underground rapper in Daegu's hip-hop scene, performing under the name Gloss, producing beats in a makeshift studio, and developing an artistic philosophy that valued authenticity above all else. When he entered the idol training system, a system structurally designed around hierarchy, obedience, and suppression of individual opinion, his personality clashed with the environment almost immediately. But within BTS, that clash did not create division. It created a communication culture that multiple members have identified as the single most important reason the group survived its hardest years. The most revealing documented evidence comes from BTS's annual Festa celebrations, particularly the group dinners that are filmed and released publicly. In the 2018 Festa dinner, which became one of the most widely analyzed pieces of BTS content ever released, the members openly discussed periods of internal conflict with a candor that shocked fans and industry observers alike. RM admitted to moments when the group's direction felt uncertain and tensions ran high. J-Hope described a period during the Wings era when he felt emotionally exhausted and struggled to maintain the positive energy the group relied on him for. Jimin spoke about insecurity and the pressure of performance standards, and through the conversation, a pattern was visible. They were not tiptoeing around each other, they were speaking directly, without cushioning language, without deflection, the way siblings argue at a family dinner where everyone knows the relationship is strong enough to survive honesty. That communication style traces directly back to Suga. In multiple interviews across the years, members have specifically referenced Yoongi as the person who established the group's norm of saying difficult things out loud rather than letting them calcify into resentment. In a 2021 Weverse magazine interview, RM described the group's conflict resolution process. When tensions arose, the members would sit down and talk it out directly. No mediators, no management intervention, just 7 people in a room saying exactly what they felt. RM credited this approach with preventing the kind of slow internal erosion that has ended countless other groups in the K-pop industry, where unresolved grievances between members become career-ending fractures. What makes this habit genuinely sibling-like is the specific texture of how BTS delivers honesty to each other. It is not clinical, it is not professional. It carries the exact emotional quality of siblings who know each other so well that formality would feel absurd. Suga has been filmed telling members their ideas need more work with the same tone an older brother uses when he knows his sibling can do better. Jungkook, in behind-the-scenes footage from album recording sessions, has been shown giving vocal feedback to other members with a bluntness he would never use with anyone outside the group. Jin, despite being the eldest, receives and delivers criticism within the group dynamic with no deference to hierarchy, a pattern that mirrors families where age creates affection, but not immunity from honesty. In Korean culture, this kind of direct communication between individuals of different ages and positions within a group is genuinely unusual. The hierarchical system of honorifics and social deference is deeply embedded, and most professional groups, especially in entertainment, maintain formal boundaries that prevent younger members from speaking candidly to older ones. BTS dismantled that structure internally, and Suga was the architect. Not through a speech, not through a rule, through the accumulated weight of 1,000 honest conversations that proved directness does not break bonds, it reinforces them. That is not a group habit. That is a family language. And the final member on this list carries a shared habit so foundational that without it, none of the others would exist.
Number 1. RM, the family first instinct. Kim Namjoon made a decision when he was 17 years old that would quietly define the next decade and a half of 7 lives. He chose to stop being a solo artist, not because he lacked the talent, not because the opportunity was not there. He stopped because Big Hit Entertainment asked him to lead a group, and something in that request aligned with a part of him that understood, even at 17, that what he could build with other people would outlast anything he could build alone. That instinct, the reflexive decision to prioritize the collective over the individual, became the most fundamental shared habit in BTS. Every member adopted it. Every member has been tested on it, and every single time, for over 13 years, every single one of them chose the group. That is not teamwork. That is the survival instinct of a family. RM was born September 12, 1994 in Ilsan, Goyang, Gyeonggi Province. Before BTS, he was already an established presence in Seoul's underground hip-hop scene, rapping under the name Runch Randa, collaborating with notable artists, building a reputation that could have carried a solo career. When Bang Si-hyuk recruited him as the foundation of a new idol group, Namjoon had to make a choice that every naturally gifted individual eventually faces: lead alone or build something bigger that requires sharing the stage. He chose to share. And from the moment the other 6 trainees entered his orbit, he began modeling a behavior that none of them had been explicitly taught, but all of them would eventually absorb into their core operating system. When the family needs you, you show up and you put the family first, even when the personal cost is significant. The most visible test of this shared instinct came in 2018 when BTS's original 7-year contract with Big Hit Entertainment was set to expire. In the K-pop industry, contract renewal periods are historically when groups fracture. Members leave for better deals, solo ambitions pull individuals away from the group, and the financial incentives to go independent become almost irrationally compelling, especially for a group that was, by 2018, the biggest musical act on the planet. BTS renewed. All 7, together. RM spoke about this decision publicly, and what he described was not a business negotiation. It was a family conversation. The members sat together, discussed their futures together, and arrived at a collective decision together. No member pursued a separate deal. No member leveraged the moment for individual advantage. They operated as a unit because by that point, operating as a unit was no longer a professional strategy. It was an instinct as automatic as the protective reflex a sibling feels when another sibling is under threat. That same instinct surfaced again in June 2022 during the now famous Festa dinner where the members publicly discussed their decision to pursue solo activities while maintaining BTS as an active group. The conversation was emotional, raw, and broadcast to millions of fans worldwide. What was striking was not that they were taking a break, it was that every member framed the conversation around the group's long-term survival rather than personal opportunity. Jimin cried while expressing his desire for BTS to continue. Jungkook struggled to articulate how much the group meant to him beyond his individual career. Suga, with characteristic directness, stated that the solo period was necessary precisely because it would make BTS stronger when they reconvened. J-Hope spoke about wanting to grow individually so he could bring more back to the collective. Jin and V both expressed an understanding that the temporary separation was in service of something permanent, and RM, the person who had been carrying the weight of the group's identity on his shoulders since he was 17, sat at that table and made it clear that for him, BTS was not a chapter in his career, it was the structure around which his entire adult life had been built. Every member at that table mirrored his language. Every member echoed his priority. The family comes first. Not because someone told them to say it, because after 13 years of watching their leader consistently subordinate his extraordinary individual potential to the collective good, they had internalized the habit so completely that it no longer required conscious thought. RM built the instinct. 6 brothers adopted it. And that, more than the food, more than the cleaning, more than the tears, the silence, the honesty, or the mirrored mannerisms, is the habit that makes BTS not just a group, but a family that chose each other and keeps choosing each other every single day.
7 strangers walked into a dorm in 2010. 13 years later, they cook at midnight like a family, clean like a family, cry like a family, speak without words like a family, fight with honesty like a family, and protect each other like a family. Nobody assigned these habits. Nobody wrote them into a contract. They were built. One shared meal, one honest argument, one silent glance at a time, until the line between chosen brothers and real brothers disappeared completely. BTS did not debut as a family. They became one. And the proof is not in their music, their awards, or their record-breaking numbers. It is in the tiny, invisible habits that no camera was ever supposed to catch, but that 13 years of footage made impossible to deny. If this video made you see BTS differently, hit that like button. If you want more deep dives like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below. Which shared habit surprised you the most? And if someone you know needs this to see it, send it to them. We'll see you in the next one.